Canada's actions match its words. Roland previously served as foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He's now a professor of international affairs at the University of Ottawa. Hi, Professor Paris. Good to see you as always.
Good to see you.
At the meeting of foreign affairs ministers at NATO headquarters, Minister Joly said that Canada's goal in the actions it's taken so far is to suffocate the Russian regime. Do you think that's actually happening?
Well, the Russian regime doesn't show any sign of teetering, and there's no sign of profound disaffection within the security services or even in the population. But bear in mind what Jake Sullivan, the U.S. National Security Advisor, said, I think, on Monday, that the purpose of these sanctions are really, first, to exact a price on Vladimir Putin for what he's doing, and secondly, to grind down the Russian economy and especially the Russian industrial base, the sources of Russian economic power. That is happening. That will take some time to bear fruit. But I think that, the kind of sanctions we've seen are going to have a profound effect on Russia's economy going forward.
If it does take time, which understandably it will, in the meantime, what are the implications for the types of response or actions that countries like Canada takes?
Well, I think that, NATO has been surprisingly unified and strong on this. So Canada's been doing what a lot of other countries have been doing, sanctioning more or less the same group of individuals and entities, reinforcing our presence in Europe to say to Russia that we take this threat very seriously. So Canada announced a reinforcement of the battle group that we lead in Latvia, and of course, providing lethal weapons. And Canada's done that, although what we've seen is this whole conflict has exposed the limits of the military stores of Canada, and that's a matter of some concern going forward.
What implications are there of that, for example, for what we might see in the budget tomorrow? Like, do you think that is something that needs to be addressed in the near future?
Well, the Prime Minister has suggested that in order to provide additional weapons to the Ukrainians, it may be necessary for Canada to buy weapons to provide them to the Ukrainians because of the limited stores that Canada has available. So if that's true, then I would expect and hope to see announcements to that effect. But the longer term challenge is one that we need to be taking seriously here, not just what's going to happen this week or next week. We are unfortunately entering a more dangerous world. The Secretary General of NATO correctly said we have to be prepared for this conflict to be a long haul. And it's not just Russia. China is much more patient than the Russians are, but they are waiting for their opportunity to flex their muscles too. So we need to be investing in the tools that we'll need to assure our security over the medium and longer term.
The goal set out by NATO and its allies years ago is reaching 2% of GDP on defense spending. The NDP says that number is arbitrary. Do you think that's true?
Well, it's not arbitrary. It is the target that allies agreed to work towards. I think it's one of the things that we really need to take seriously right now is whether we are equipping ourselves with both the military and the diplomatic capacity to be able to deal with the world that we're facing and to deal with the kind of threats that Canada will be facing as well, not just in Europe, but potentially in Asia and in the Arctic. 2% is what the alliance set as the target. Canada spends one of the lowest spenders in terms of percent of GDP at about 1.36% last year. The average for NATO, there are many that have reached the 2%. The average is something like 1.75%. We should at least be spending the average of NATO countries, if not aiming for that 2% figure.
There might be among those who are not as enthusiastic about reaching that target or any target, the sense that it's them, not us, right? That the threat is more imminent a couple of continents over rather than here. What would you say to people who have those set of concerns?
Well, I think that we've unfortunately learned through a very painful history in the 20th century that Europe's security and our security are very closely related. Most of our closest democratic allies in Europe are in Europe. We have a very strong interest in a Europe that is secure. We also have an interest in a world in which a country like Russia can't just gobble up its neighbor, and the implications that that would have, and the lesson that that would give to authoritarian governments in many other parts of the world. That's the immediate question. The medium and longer term question relates to our Arctic. We are not sufficiently securing our Arctic, considering the potential threats that are emerging there, and also what is brewing in Asia. We have to be thinking about this defense spending and spending on our diplomacy as an insurance policy, not just for current needs, but for, unfortunately, a more uncertain future.
I have a question for you just before I let you go on diplomacy, and not necessarily as it relates to spending on it, but the discussion that's going on right now about whether or not Canada, for example, should expel Russian diplomats or Russia's ambassador. It seems to be a little bit more alive of a discussion, if I could characterize it that way, than it was even a few weeks ago. We heard the Prime Minister go kind of explain why he thinks maybe he should or maybe he shouldn't, kind of what the thinking is going back and forth. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the context is that many of our allies have expelled some Russian diplomats in protest over the Russian behavior. The logic of ending relations, kicking all the Russians out of Canada, which is what some people want, to me doesn't make any sense at all, because number one, they would just kick all the Canadian diplomats out of Russia, and we would lose our capacity to learn what our diplomats can within Russia. Secondly, we do need to maintain channels of communication open. But kicking out a few diplomats, like our allies are doing, would send a signal. It wouldn't endanger our presence in Moscow in a fundamental way. I don't see why we wouldn't take that modest measure. Not doing so simply leads to questions like the one you asked me, like, why aren't we doing it?
Gotcha. Okay, Professor Paris, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, as always. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you.